Clerk, call the roll.
Glenn Whitley, County Judge.
Here.
Roy C. Brooks, Commissioner Precinct 1. Marty Van Ravensway, Commissioner Precinct 2.
Here.
Gary Fickus, Commissioner Precinct 3. J.D. Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4.
Here.
Constitutes a quorum.
Thank you. Our invocation this morning will be given by Pastor Bayard Pratt from Martin United Methodist Church. After the invocation, please remain standing for our pledges. Pratt, thank you very much for being here today.
Let us pray. Our good and gracious God, we come before you this morning with new decisions and old controversies, new dreams and old weaknesses. And yet, because you are the God of hope, we know that there are always new possibilities in the future. Pray for this court and the community of Tarrant County. Give us a new sense of your calling and purpose, and help us to fulfill the goals and crystallize our dreams for a new future. Be with those who dedicate so many hours of service to others, and give us, together, a new understanding of what it means to be your disciples in this community. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
We need to practice that.
Mr. Manius, agenda announcements.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the court, we have 4 announcements for you this morning. First, under the Administrator section, item A3. This relates to the submission of a juvenile justice grant. We're going to remove that from the agenda this morning. We're not going to ask for any action on that particular one. Members of the court, under purchasing, item H3. This is the sale of recycled paper. There is a new court communication in your red folder this morning as it relates to that particular item. Members of the court, under item J1, this is under transportation. There is a revised court communication in your folder this morning. The revision on that particular item was simply a change in the funding code. And then finally, members of the court, I would like to remind the court that we do have a IT steering committee meeting this afternoon at 2 o'clock over in the Family Law Center. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Court members, you have before you the minutes of our 2 meetings.
Both of them? I'll second.
A motion and a second to approve the minutes of our regular meeting of February 26 and our special call meeting of February 27. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion. Somebody's here that's not here. Passes unanimously. This is the time of the meeting when GK leaves and the rest of us stay in for employee recognition. No, this is one of our favorite times of the month, and I take every advantage I can to embarrass him. He knows that. We'll recognize at first our 5-year, then our 10, and then our 15. And then we'll have a few special moments for those folks who've been with us for 20-plus years. And it is really always a fun time. I will tell you, sometimes I put it off to the last minute, but I really enjoy calling around and having conversations with those employees who've been here 20-plus years. I usually get some pretty good stories, and even have one this morning. So I'll just kind of keep you in suspense until, I see Judge Sprinkle out there trying to figure out whether that's him that's going to be the focus of that story. We'll start off with our 5-year employees, and if you would please remain standing until I've completed the 5 years, and then we'll recognize you and at that particular point in time. The first one is Jay Capel from the Sheriff's Communications. And again, I will kind of asterisk all of this by saying if it sounds somewhat close, stand up. And if you're so moved to correct, then let me know so that people will recognize how I should have pronounced your name. Bill Castor, Constable, Precinct 1. Frank Figueroa, Precinct Maintenance. There you go, Frank. Denisha Garner, Law Library. Jeffrey Green, Public Health. Tony Jones, Sheriff Confinement. Sandra Jones, CSCD. Sandra, welcome. Boyd Llewellyn, Sheriff Confinement. Diane Matthews, Transportation. Maurice Mitchell, Sheriff Confinement. Joanna Olmos, Public Health. Sarah Ovindo Perez, Public Health. Did we get close? Oviendo.
You got Sarah right.
See what I mean? Wayne Sanders, Precinct 4 Maintenance. Thank you all very much. We appreciate your 5 years of service. Let's give them a big hand. Our 10-year employees, Cecil Best, Sheriff, Confinement. Vicki Coffey, Probate Court Number 1. David Dawson, Precinct 4 Maintenance. Welcome. Deborah Drummond, CSCD. Drummond. I'll bet that was close. Ruben Garcia, Sheriff, Courts. Melvin Green, Sheriff, Confinement. Felicia Guy, District Attorney's Office. I worked on that Felicia, and she didn't even show up. Paula Harold, Sheriff, Confinement. Emily Hewitt, Sheriff, Warrants. Emily, welcome. Shane James, Sheriff, Confinement. Coy Massey, Facilities Management. Morning. He worked this weekend cleaning the windows in this building. Having them clean. Well,
He doesn't do windows.
he was talking about how good everybody was about getting their stuff out of the seals in the judge's office. Charlotte McNally, Administrator's Office. Charlotte, there's Charlotte. Donna Mitchell, Sheriff, Confinement. Wanda Newton, Sheriff, Patrol. Diedrich Paramore, Sheriff, Confinement. It was Derek, wasn't it? Yeah. Janet Dempsey, Human Resources. Regina Ramon, Public Health. Glenn Richardson, Sheriff, Patrol. Stacy Rudick, Information Technology. Rochelle Tyler, Sheriff, Confinement. These are our 10-year employees. Let's give them a big hand. "15 years. Janet Barnett, District Attorney's Office. Guy Dixon, Public Health. David Hagerman, District Attorney's Office. James Lockman, Sheriff's Courts. There's James. Connie Only, County Clerk's Office. We know she's here every week. We appreciate it. Donna Sneed, Purchasing. Jan Toten, County Clerk. That's our 15 years. Let's give them a big round. Now, as I said earlier, for our 20-year employees, we do spend a little bit of time with them individually, and so our first, we got a problem here. I was wondering when this was going to happen.
There's those computers.
Work with me on this deal here. It's not that much of a problem. I found it. You just don't know the half of it. I mean, we're a little over a year here, and I just knew that I had deleted the right file. Stephanie Hogan. Stephanie, stand up. Welcome. I'm welcoming you a whole lot more now that I found this file. I'm going to guarantee you that.
Remember all that by
No, that was a little panicky. We're going to have to let my heartbeat kind of slow down a little bit here. Stephanie has been with CSCD for 20 years. She started out in the clerical pool downtown, and then went to the transfer-in unit. From there, went to the Miller office, and then she said it was her best location. It was out in Northeast with me when I was commissioner. She said she remembers the hamburgers that Jane and I used to cook out there on Employee Appreciation Day. She didn't tell me whether she remembered them because they were good or bad, but she remembered them.
Hamburgers.
Well, we cooked hamburgers out there. We didn't have the high
it's a
stuff.
hot dog, though.
No, well, we were able to find a few hamburgers. She's now in the Arlington office. When I asked her what she liked most, it was the opportunity to meet new people every day that she's had a chance to work with, and then the other thing she said, what she really enjoyed about it was she was meeting people who really wanted to try to do good, who wanted to try to turn it around, and she really enjoyed that part of it. She said the time has really flown by these 20 years, and that she hopes that the next 20 years go as fast. And we do too. We really appreciate your service and hope you'll be with us, Stephanie, for another 20 years. Thank you very much. Next is Judge Sprinkle. Stand up, sir. Judge has been with us for 20 years. He really helps this office out in that he takes care of hearing all the protests for our beer and licenses, and really has helped quite a bit in that particular regard. He's really the first and the only judge that this court, County Court at Law Number 3, has ever had. And he said, he remembers being sworn in, and I guess that obviously would have been in 1988. And then he remembers having to immediately, that was in March, I think you said, of 88, and then immediately had to run for election and was elected in November of 88. He also remembers, I guess, as one of his more memorable moments, that he's been the president of the statewide Statutory Judges Association. And, again, I think that points to his leadership capabilities and the respect that he holds throughout the state. He said he really has enjoyed his service on the bench, and he feels gratified every day to know that he's up and serving the folks in Tarrant County. He said it's really a family atmosphere, and Judge, we very much appreciate, anytime we've called over there, you've never even hesitated to help in any way you could, and we appreciate that very much. Let's give him a hand. Next is Marie West with the District Attorney's Office. There she is. Been with us for 20 years. Spent all 20 years in the DA's office. Currently is the coordinator, I believe, of the Family Violence Unit. Had started off, I guess, as a legal assistant who was providing info for injured parties and interviews, and had been doing that since 1999, I believe, December of 99. Before that, had been a forfeiture paralegal, and first started out, I guess, in the drug forfeiture area, and then over into the auto task force area. Most memorable moments, she said that she has really worked with some great people, and mentioned Fred Cummings and Sherry as some of the folks that she really has felt honored to be able to work for. When I asked her what she liked most, like so many people do, it's the people that she works with, being in touch with people who call in, and then being able to really let them know what help is out there for them. I think she put it a very good way. It's trying to take the mystery out of the frustration that the legal system can sometimes be to someone who doesn't understand that system. And I could really tell from our conversation that she really tries to make that, what has got to be a very stressful time, as easy to navigate in as possible. we really appreciate your time with Tarrant County, and we hope you'll be with us for many years. Thank you very much. Now, next is Roxanne Woodard. And there you go. Now he's really beginning to sweat. I can tell. He's beginning to move around a little bit. She has actually worked with Judge Sprinkle for 27 years. She was with him 7 years while he was in private practice, and then when he was elected to the bench, she came to help him out there and has really kind of motivated him and kind of navigated him through the system. This is me saying this isn't her. Now, when I got to the more memorable moments, she indicated a couple. She said one year there was a live llama in their courtroom. Now, he wouldn't tell me anything like this, but she said, yeah, there was something had happened, and one of these llamas had passed away, and so the owner was trying to show the jury, and so at that time, I guess y'all were on the first floor of the old Civil Courts building, and so somewhere or another they managed to get a live llama in that courtroom, and
We're talking about a dead llama.
no, well, yeah, but it was to show them. I don't know how. I don't know. I was still laughing at the fact I could just envision this live llama being in this courtroom. My only question was, did the llama spit on the jurors? And she said no, the llama was well behaved. So that was obviously one thing that has always kind of stuck in her mind. And just recently, I guess, Judge, I know you and your wife celebrated your 25th anniversary, and y'all had planned to go to Hawaii, and that had gotten canceled. And so, as I understand it, an Elvis impersonator showed up and may have turned y'all a little bit on the red side. But that was one of the more memorable moments. When I asked Roxanne what she liked most, again, it was how helpful and friendly everybody was. She said she just loves her work because it is different and it is challenging, and she said because I have a wonderful boss who is really a very good friend of mine. And so, Roxanne, we appreciate the 20 years you've given to Tarrant County, and I'm sure that the judge appreciates the 27 years that you've been with him. So, thank you very, very much. Next is John Thompson, Constable, Precinct number 8, has been with us for 25 years. John came and started in the Deputy Sheriff's Office and worked security there for, I guess, 8 years, and that was when Lon Evans was the sheriff. And then he came to the Constable's office in 1990 and has been the Chief Deputy for, I guess, the last 10 years. When I asked him his more memorable moments, he said it was, again, meeting people and being able to help them with their problems. And it's just, again, I think it's what makes Tarrant County such a great place to live and to work is employees really like John who are not here just for the paycheck, but they're really here to help people and to go through that process. What he likes most, he said, Tarrant County provides great job stability, and he said it's really a career that Tarrant County has that tries to encourage the employees that work for them for this to be a career for them. He said he's had a chance over his 25 years with the county to basically work with 4 county judges, and I'm very pleased to John to be able to say that I'm one of the judges that you were able to work with, and I appreciate very much the 25 years service that you've given to this county. Thank you very much. Last is Norris Branham. Norris, there's Norris. Norris has been with us for 25 years. Started out in Tim's office when he was 41 years old. I shouldn't have told that. Now they know. He said, and he went to Tim and he asked him for a job. He said he started out as an entry-level DA at the age of 41, and he was so glad to get that. To get that job and to be able to come to work for Tarrant County. He recollected that his first boss was Judge Boyd, Gene Boyd at the time. Went to work for DRO in the fall of...
She was a lot younger.
Yeah, see, you're still playing those politics there, Norris. He went to work for the DRO in the fall of '83 when that area was actually created, and then was appointed to as director of that unit in June of 1986. When I asked him for his more memorable moments, he said one of those periods that he remembers was that time in between the time that the director had left and he was serving kind of as that interim director and just, kind of being on pins and needles. Am I going to get the job or am I not going to get that job? He said, one of the sad days was the day of the shooting over at the courthouse. He said, I can remember it like it was yesterday. He said, I was in the office, in Gary Kirby's office, and we were basically talking, and all of a sudden we looked out the window and saw, folks running, and he said it was we knew something was wrong. It was a very, very sad day. He said on a brighter note, he said the opening of the Family Law Center was something that he'll always remember and how much he enjoys working in there. And again, we have to thank the folks who work in that building because they really spent a great deal of their time designing that, and I think that's what has resulted in us having a building that is so people-friendly. When I asked him what he liked most, he said practicing law for several years before going to work for Tarrant County in a small community. And he was talking about in Fort Worth, and he said how practicing law in Fort Worth really, you knew a lot of folks, and it was a very small community. And he said he really had enjoyed that very much, and once he came to Tarrant County, he was able to keep those relationships and keep that going. His ability to work with counties all over the state. And he said, one of the things that he likes most is that when he does work with folks from other counties and other areas of the state, how well-respected Tarrant County is among those folks, and really for our leadership and for the innovation that many of the department heads and many of the elected officials in this room today and in this county really promote as they go about. They're not afraid to be active and be a part and to share, and at the same time, I think they're always there trying to figure out a way to do it better. When I asked him if there was anything else, he said he really liked the child support area. As we got through the conversation, I found out, and probably should have known this, that his wife has the same job in Dallas County. So, they've kind of got the Metroplex covered when it comes to this area. And, he again said it's great people he's had an opportunity to work for these 25 years. Norris, we very much appreciate your service to the county and to what you do for really the department all over the state. So, thank you very much. Now we're going to take a short break while everyone moves to 504C. I'm finally about to get that right, where there are refreshments. So at this time, if y'all would like to, they're going to take your picture and then feed you a little bit. Thank you all very much. Let's give them all a big hand again. And try to get started. Before we move to the remainder of the proclamations, I would like to introduce John Roth. John, stand up. John is a commissioner from Precinct 3 out in Parker County and was in visiting this morning and said he was going to sit in on the first part of our meeting. Welcome, John. Take greetings back to everyone out there, and try to keep them in line, especially that county judge you got out there. I know that's tough. Our first resolution or proclamation this month will be Red Cross Month. And Jason, if you'll go ahead and come forward, I'll read the proclamation. Whereas every day, with the help of generous donors, Red Cross volunteers and employees carry out their mission to provide essential services to people in their communities. And whereas more than 90 years, North Texans have relied on the expertise of the American Red Cross in disaster relief, and whereas each year the Chisholm Trail chapter responds to about 550 disasters, including house and apartment fires, hurricanes, and other natural or human-caused disasters. And whereas in 2007, the Chisholm Trail chapter sent 1,686 emergency messages to active duty military personnel and their families, while also reaching out to members of the National Guard and Reserves and their families who reside in nearly every community in North Texas. And whereas without the help of the Chisholm Trail chapter volunteers, the local Red Cross would not be able to fulfill the humanitarian mission that is the cornerstone of the organization. And whereas the Red Cross makes every effort to save lives long before tragedy strikes by helping individuals and entire communities learn to prepare for disasters by providing training in essential skills such as first aid and CPR, water safety, and the use of automated external defibrillators, and to aid victims of sudden cardiac arrest and thereby saving untold numbers of lives. And whereas March has been designated as Red Cross Month by U.S. presidential proclamation to celebrate the achievement of the Red Cross in the services it provides to communities nationwide, now therefore be it resolved that we, the Commissioners Court of Tarrant County, do hereby recognize this remarkable organization and all those who have answered the call to serve a cause greater than self, to offer support and healing in times of need. And further, we urge that during this extraordinary time for our country, our community acknowledges and continues to support the ongoing contribution of the Red Cross in helping our families prevent, prepare for, and respond to emergencies and disasters throughout the year. In witness whereof, we have heretofore set our hands and caused the seal of Tarrant County to be affixed this 11th day of March, 2008.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Jason, let me present this to you and give you an opportunity to make any comments that you'd like to make.
Thank you very much, Judge. Judge, members of the court, on behalf of the more than 1,000 volunteers active here in our community through the Chisholm Trail chapter, allow me to say thank you very much for acknowledging that March is in fact Red Cross Month. Let me also provide special acknowledgement to Tarrant County and its leadership with Commissioner Brooks, Crystal James, the Honorable Betsy Price, and others serving in specific volunteer roles with us. We are stronger today than we ever have been. I want to pay specific attention to our, for the first time, having been included in the Tarrant County Urban Area Security Initiative's grant request through the Department of Homeland Security. We're working with Melissa Patterson and the Emergency Operations Office very closely on building our capacity as an organization collaboratively with the county and a number of the municipalities throughout our area, and we could not do the work that we're doing, could not grow in the ways that we're growing without your support. So on behalf of all of us at the Red Cross, thank you for acknowledging us and Red Cross Month, and for your support to our vital mission. It's great to be with you today.
Thank you, Jason. Our next proclamation is for ratification purposes only, and I will move its approval.
Second.
I have a motion to second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Commissioner Johnson, I believe this next resolution on Chief Quanah Parker is also for ratification.
Ratification only. I would move approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Please vote. Then the next two, the congratulatory proclamation and resolution by Commissioner Brooks, are also for ratification only, and I'll move the approval of 6 E and F.
Second.
Motion is second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Next is a resolution on recognition of the 50th anniversary of the city of Watauga, and Commissioner Fickus called me this morning and made sure that I knew that he was going to be watching on video as we read this proclamation. We have Mayor Jeffries and the city manager, Carrie Lacey, here. Y'all come on forward, and I'll read the proclamation into the record. Whereas the Cherokee Indians were the first inhabitants of the region who named the area Watauga, meaning villages of many springs, and were followed by settlers from Tennessee who arrived around 1843. And whereas the first church in Watauga, the Willow Springs Presbyterian Church, was organized in 1867, and whereas it was 1958 when Watauga was incorporated, and the first town meeting was held to raise funds with a pie supper to establish a volunteer fire department in City Hall on land deeded to the city by the Tarrant Utility Company. And whereas from a population of 50 in 1940, the city of Watauga has grown to over 24,000 today, with a municipal complex encompassing City Hall, the fire and police departments, and a public library. And whereas Watauga continues to build its legacy of abundance and prosperity through aggressive economic growth, low crime rates, highly rated school districts, affordable housing, and accessibility to shopping, entertainment, and recreation, now therefore be it resolved that we, the Commissioners' Court of Tarrant County, do hereby congratulate the citizens of the city of Watauga on the occasion of their 50th anniversary and wish them continued growth and success. In witness whereof, we have heretofore set our hands and caused the seal of Tarrant County to be affixed this 11th day of March, 2008. And I'll move its approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. This is always a side of the challenge. Thank you. Come on, stand on there. Get on over here. Mary, you get in the middle, and tell you what, you get on the side, and we'll go like this.
Okay, y'all ready? We do one more. Great. Thank you.
Y'all, any comments you'd like to make?
Judge Whitley and members of the court, on behalf of the citizens of Watauga, the City Council, my employees, I wish to thank you for this thoughtful recognition, this resolution that you've presented us today. And once again, my thanks, and hope to see you come out and participate in our celebration this Saturday. You'll be welcome, and I know you'll have a good time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mayor, would you like to?
Just one quick comment. Gary, I know you're watching this. Thank you. I appreciate it. The city of Watauga has over 140 road projects done with Tarrant County, and we appreciate all the help you give us. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I know.
that mayor does not speak to the Texas drawl, so.
As I always say at the TML, I don't have an accent. You all down here talk funny.
Well, where are you from, Mayor?
From Steel.
Well, we knew it was pretty close to there. So, thank you all again. Appreciate it. Court members, you have before you the consent agenda, with the exception of item 8A3, which has been removed from the consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Manius.
Your Honor, members of the court, we have two additional items we'd like to bring to the court this morning. On item number 1, we're requesting that the Commissioners Court approve a second renewal and extension of an office lease agreement between the Hospital District and Quest Diagnostics. This agreement has been approved by the Hospital District Board of Managers at its February 14th meeting.
Move for approval.
Second.
A motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Your Honor, members of the court, on item number 2, we're requesting that the court approve a court order designating the places and terms for all future appointments to be made to the Tarrant County Hospital District Board of Managers. That order is attached to your court communication. Staff is recommending approval.
Let me ask one question, if I could, for clarification before we start motions on this. But let's assume, now this says March of each year.
That's
these
correct.
appointments are to be made. But let's say that for some reason, maybe somebody extending their term as president of the board or something until December. So what happens if we go until December and then make an appointment?
That appointment will serve until for the remainder of that term. It won't be a 2-year appointment, but it'll be the length of that appointment will be for the remainder of the term that exists, and that depends if it's a place 1 or place 2 position.
Well, let's say that position has already expired.
Okay. Still, whenever the appointment is made, it'll be made to serve for the remainder of that particular term.
Till the following March.
It depends if it's an odd-numbered or an even-numbered place. If it's an odd-numbered place, then it would expire. Oh, let's see. It would be on the odd year in March, and even number would be the even year in March.
Okay. I think I understand now.
And we're not actually making any appointments at this time. All we're doing at this point in time is simply kind of reconstituting.
You're reconstituting the appointment process. In the past, each court member had 5. Each court member had their own individual appointee, which represented 5 of the 11, and then there were 6 that were at large, where the court made as a whole. What this does, it simply changes that mix, where that each court member now has 2 appointments, and that equals 10, and then there's 1 at large. And
How's that one?
that the at-large is appointed by the Commissioners Court. It is something that we will accept eligible nominees from the UNT Health Science Center.
For, I guess, really since 1980, we have had a doctor of osteopathic medicine on the hospital board. And sometimes that has been as a result of a recommendation from UNT. Sometimes it has been from TCOM. Sometimes it's just been, I think, as a court member.
Ever since I've been here, it's been a recommendation from TCOM.
Right. And so I think that's what our thought process is on that, is to let them make a recommendation, and then, if that meets with the approval of the court, then that individual would fill that at-large spot from that standpoint.
I will say, just for clarification, while we have slotted current board members into these various slots, our requested action is not to reappoint any of these. It is simply to create these positions and slot people in those positions.
Okay.
Now, each one of them right now is slotted in either place 1 or place 2.
That's correct.
So if we wanted to change those, we need to change them now.
That's correct.
Well, and if you didn't, I think we could change them. You can change them now, certainly, if you would like to make that change. Or if you would prefer, you can change them at a future time. When Commissioner Brooks or Commissioner Fickus, if either one of them would rather, move those around, then I think we can do that without any problem as far as just switching them within those places.
I want to go ahead and do that today if that's acceptable.
Oh, that's fine. I think that's fine.
I'll reverse the 1 and 2.
Well, I want to think about mine a little bit, but
Yeah.
okay. So we need a motion then to approve this recommendation, and this is replacing our existing board policy,
That's correct.
appointment policy for JPS appointees.
That's correct.
I move approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ray, do you have anything at this point in time? Phillips?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
It is requested the Commissioners Court approve a professional services contract with Elements of Architecture for building space programming validation and preliminary schematic design for the renovation of the administration building.
Move approval.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
It is requested that Commissioners Court approve a professional services contract with AR Consultants for archaeological reviews of 5 Tarrant County properties for construction.
You want to go through that again?
This is required to meet the statute for the Antiquities Code of the State of Texas. We have to notify the Texas Historical Commission when we break ground for properties, and specifically it's got various triggers. That one of them is if it's over 5 acres. Number 2, if it's an historical district. 2 of these are over, there's 5 properties we're recommending. 2 of them are over 5 acres. The other 3 are close to, 2 are close to a possible fort in Fort Worth.
So you're saying now all dirt is historical?
All these 5 dirts are. We did this when we did the Family Law Center, this particular firm, and it worked out well with us, for us on this project.
Okay, I'll move approval for this historical dirt.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. No other discussion. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
It is requested that Commissioners Court approve a contract with Arthur Wyman Architects to provide professional architectural services for the repairs of the 4th floor, 1895 courthouse located at 100 West Weatherford.
Move for approval.
Second. When did we get the water damage?
The water damage happened over the last couple of years. It has internal gutters on the roof, on the corners. We've repaired the internal gutters, and now we'd like to repair the interior damage.
And of course, this puts it back to its original
Yes, Commissioner, it will.
design, color, texture, and all that.
There's a lot of plaster architecture in there, large plaster architectural pieces that have to be designed, and the project needs to have more side observations than normal for quality reviews.
We've dealt with Mr. Wyman a number of times on historical repairs for this building, so he's certainly qualified and knowledgeable in that area.
Yes.
You think we want to hire Dee to help him with that?
We can on the next one, possibly.
Any other discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
I move to receive and file the personnel agenda.
Second?
Have a motion and a second to receive and file the personnel agenda. Any discussion?
Not here.
Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Your Honor. We're requesting approval of change order number 1 with the Sage Group for SAP Business Warehouse. While they're here assisting us with the ERP upgrade, we want them to review our business warehouse for improvements.
Move for approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. It doesn't look like Mrs. Brewer. Welcome.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm here to request approval of item number 1 of the Public Health. There for approval of a professional services contract with the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory to provide syndromic surveillance system development services. This is basically to upgrade the system that we already have in place and have been using for the last 2 years, to upgrade it and to add some additional modules that we need to use here in the county.
Move for approval.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Bill, why don't you introduce yourself to the court? This is just another face of public health, but Bill has been with us for a while. And Bill, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Bill Stevens. I'm the manager of the Advanced Practice Center at Public Health. This is one of our public health preparedness programs that's under a grant contract with NACHO, with the National Association of County and City Health Officials, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So we've been developing this system actually over the last 4 years, and it's not only used widely here amongst public health and hospital personnel in Tarrant County, but actually all across the north central Texas region in Dallas and Denton and Collin counties, even up in Wichita County. So it's a very popular system, and it's being used for early detection of disease outbreaks and early warning for things that might be caused by a bioterrorist attack.
Now that you bring that up, thank you. The little episode that happened yesterday where someone from the federal building decided to take what they thought might be anthrax down to the hospital, which effectively closed their emergency room down, I think, for several hours, I believe. How are we communicating to folks that when something like that happens, that really the last place in the world you want to take it is to the public hospital?
Well, that would be handled through our other public health preparedness public information programs. And
Is that Melissa over there?
No. Lou, do you want to address that?
Good.
I'd heard about this.
On this particular situation, we don't have the details of how the case presented to the hospital, although I heard this morning that the individual presented himself. So if that's the case, Melissa's verifying that. If that's the case, we can't control for somebody just presenting themselves. However, the hospitals have been training and exercising for scenarios where the members of the public start to present themselves. So for what I know of how they responded, it sounds like they did the right thing, and that's because they've been training and exercising.
And again, I mean, I guess for those of y'all who may not have read about it, apparently what happened was is someone at the federal building got an envelope that implied that there was anthrax inside. They thought, well, golly, I'll take it to the hospital. And they walked into the emergency room, I believe, at Harris Hospital, and that in effect shut the hospital down. And so, you know, at least from what I have heard in some of the meetings I've been to, basically you want to keep things like that away from the hospital so the hospital stays open during a time. And so that's, again, an education that needs to occur, and we need to kind of keep going forward on that. But it created a little bit of a stir down there, I think, at Harris yesterday. Thank you. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second, and I think we've already voted. So at this point in time, we'll move right on to purchasing.
Your Honor, the members of the court, we have 4 items for your consideration this morning. Our first item is a bid award recommendation for RFO number 2008-070 for the purchase of automated external defibrillators for Public Health Department. Recommendation will be to award to Dimensions Medical Supply Group Incorporated, amount of $43,945.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Jack, how many are we buying, and what kind of procedure do we have in place to determine that whatever frequency or?
These are the latest and the greatest, the new models, and I believe it's 40.
Are we replacing the ones that are already there?
Do they become obsolete after a period of time?
Well, these are, I believe there's 20 new ones, or 30 new ones, I'm sorry. This is for the Public Health Department. It's for their, I believe they call it PODS program.
For part of the preparedness preparation. Yeah, they are for their pods. They will actually be located at Public Health, and then they'll be disseminated in the event pods are activated.
So they're not going to be out for public use right now?
No.
So they're not, okay. What is our procedure? Yeah, Come on down, Lou, or somebody,
Somebody tell us what a pod is.
since we're fixing to buy 30 of these things, and it sounds like we're not going to use them. Of course, I hope we never have to use any of them.
Pods are points of distribution or dispensation. These are our various locations throughout the county. If we would have a pandemic flu event or some other catastrophic event, we would have these places open, and we would have large numbers of people there in very stressful situations. So it's part of the emergency backup plan. It's being purchased through preparedness funding. And actually, we were approached by our risk management office, and we're actually going to put and we've gotten this approved by the state, we're actually going to put the newer AEDs in the sheriff's patrol cars so that they can be being used and not just stored, and we'll keep the older ones that are perfectly good, but for the points of distribution. And then, of course, if we actually had an event, then we'd bring them all in. Yes.
And just to take it a step further, we have procedures that are in place, especially for those located in our facilities, where building maintenance checks the batteries and all of the internal equipment that's carried inside of the pods and the units on a regular basis. So we try to keep all those safety measures in place to make sure that if they are ever needed, they are ready to go.
And we have at least one defibrillator in every one of our buildings, is that correct?
To the best of my knowledge, that is correct. And we'll provide you, we maintain a list of where they're all located, if you'd like to see
And when
that.
they are used and when they're also serviced and...
Is that something that, David, is that something that you handle as far as keeping that inventory? This is teamwork at its best.
No one can answer.
Oh, they're answering.
We maintain the AEDs on a periodic, I think it's annually, and we check the pads, the batteries and such. I couldn't tell you when they've been used,
Now,
though.
we know that.
But if they're used, don't you have to go through some process to get it
We
ready?
have to, there's a process where you download the readings inside of the AED to doctor, and the doctor's, his name's escaping me.
Dr.
Anybody help me?
To a doctor.
Dr. Adams?
No. Anyway, it's downloaded, and that's reviewed and analyzed, and it's also, made sure that it's communicated with the hospital the person's taken to, if all of that's applicable.
I didn't mean no one was answering this. No one person could. It did
Right.
require the team.
Mm-hmm.
Well, apparent Mr. Jack couldn't. We're going to have to get more familiar with this.
But that's the people who needed to be here.
Well, and one of the
Buying
very
all these
first-
machines and doesn't know why.
The price was good, though.
When this purchase came up, that's one of the very first things we talked about is, the likelihood of them being used. Do we want the newest and the best for these pods, or do we want those available for use on a regular basis? And so Public Health had followed up with that situation and gotten approval so that we can keep a rotation going to make sure that what they have is viable and usable, and what the buildings and the patrol cars are the latest and the greatest.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Our second item is another bid award recommendation for RFP number 2008-047 for preservation of historical documents. Recommendation is to select as our primary vendor Louisiana Binding Service Incorporated, as our secondary vendor Joseph J. Marati Company Incorporated.
Move approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 3 is also a bid award recommendation for bid number 2008-078 for the sale of recycled paper. Recommendation is to award to the high bidder for mixed ledger to Southwest Paper, the rate of $227.60 per ton. And the high bidder also for cardboard to Vista Fibers at $125.50 per ton.
Move approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Our last item is an item in regards to RFP number 2008-031, RFP for residential substance abuse treatment services. Recommendation is to reject all proposals. We're seeking permission to reissue with revised specifications.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Jack. Ms. Lamb.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm here to ask that Commissioners Court approve a contract amendment with Strickle and Rollins and Associates for professional services necessary to prepare and complete construction plans and right-of-way documents for the Robertson Road project in Precinct 4. This is an amendment to the original contract.
Let me make sure on this. If for some reason the city of Fort Worth, and the reason we're requesting this is the city of Fort Worth is planning on widening in their bond program the portion of Robertson Road from Boat Club out about to where the large Methodist church is.
Yes, sir.
And then it's our section from there on down to 10 Mile Bridge Road. But if for some reason the bond package had problems or whatever, I don't think we want to spend this kind of money until we know for sure they're going to do their portion of it.
Until after the bond?
Well, that's what I'm asking. Do we
Well,
have a stopping point here?
There is the stopping point. I suppose we were 70% complete on the first one. We've stopped it. But what I would recommend at this point is that we move forward with the four-lane section as far as acquiring the right-of-way, and we can move forward with that, and that takes quite a bit of time. And then in the May election, if this bond program does fail, I don't anticipate that, but if that happens, we would still acquire the right-of-way for the 4 lanes now and only construct 2 lanes, which would match the section there. That would be my recommendation. But I think that we would move forward, go ahead and get the 4 lanes, because ultimately that's what they have planned, and we could get that out of the way. I can talk to our consultants about holding off on the design until we see what happens in the May election, but move forward with a right-of-way acquisition. That'd be my recommendation.
It's one of those things where we're trying to stay up with Fort Worth's growth, and this is a very dangerous road.
Yes, sir, it is. It definitely warrants these improvements.
Okay. So we're ready for a motion. I move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
My second item today is also a membership agreement with Western Data Systems. I'm asking that Commissioners Court approve a real-time kinematic network membership agreement with Western Data Systems. This is an agreement that is necessary for us to operate the GPS equipment that Commissioners Court approved for our 2008 budget. We have got the equipment now, and this contract will allow us to use the satellites and use this equipment to its greatest potential.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion to second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Has this Commissioner Brooks interlocal been approved for the DA's office? Move approval of K1A and B.
Second.
We have a motion to approve items 8K1, A, and B. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
And I move approval of item 8K2, A, and B.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve items 8K, 2A, and B. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Appointments.
Appointments. I have one for Commissioner Brooks. In his absence today, he has forwarded me a resume for for Reverend Ralph W. Emerson, Jr. to replace Irma Hadley on the Hospital District Board of Directors.
So we're making that a motion.
I'll move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. I have gotten a letter from the COG that is asking for nominations or people who are interested as far as a Clean Air Steering Committee. And Marty, I know that's something that you're interested. They also asked for a number of other, as far as engine technology and some things along that line. So with the court's approval, or with your permission, I will go ahead and talk with each one of you. If you've got names, it's like they want somebody, and this is more for a subcommittee, not the full committee, for clean engine technology, energy efficiency, and green building codes. And what I'll do is talk with the department heads in those areas and see if they are interested or if they have someone interested, and I'll send that letter back to the COG in that particular regard. You have before you the claims.
Move approval, include the addendum.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the claims, including the addendum. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Briefing items, Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have two items for the court this morning. The first one concerns a complaint that you've heard before on the speaker forum from Ms. Cameradiner as it relates to septic tank issues at her residence. We had briefed this with her. We've been working with Ms. Cameradiner. I'm going to ask David Jefferson to come forward initially and provide some information as it relates to that. Also, Your Honor, there is a audience participation form for Ms. Cameradiner as it relates to this. David.
David, come on down. Ms. Cameradiner, we'll be hearing from you in just 1 minute.
Also, Your Honor, Ms. Cameradiner gave us some additional information yesterday. Just a letter that it was not addressed to anyone specifically, but I would like to pass that out to the court also.
David, have you seen this?
No, sir, I was just reading it as we speak.
Okay. You got a copy of that?
We got it late,
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, good morning, Judge, Commissioners. Just scanning over this letter from Ms. Cameradiner, it's all pretty much follows and tracks what happened mostly. If Ms. Cameradiner did first contact us, and as I think the briefing paper says, back in November of 2006, she had some health concerns and was believed that it was somehow related to the property, most likely the water, because of some of a number of different things that she observed, such as when she dripped candle wax in the toilet, it formed patterns. When water dried on the property, it left a white residue, some other things such as this. At that time, we said, well, these things don't match up with any known disease-causing agents that we're aware of. But we continued to discuss it with her and suggested that if a doctor or medical professional would talk to our epidemiology department or to Dr. Adams, we might be able to work it the other direction, which is if somebody can give us a known disease agent, we can sometimes work with people to try and find the cause, or the source, rather, of that agent, if it's possibly something to do with the property. As we had more discussions through the years, questions about the on-site sewage facility came up. The schematic diagram that we get originally, which is just that, it's a schematic diagram, it's not a scale diagram, was a bit different than the way it was actually installed. Fair enough, we went back out there, and as it says in the letter, we met with Ms. Cameradiner, and our staff person did redraw the diagram to show exactly the way it was installed. There were a number of questions about whether or not it was required to have distances from some certain, there were some gullies and creeks around the property. But we verified with TCEQ that they use the definition of an intermittent stream on a USGS quad map. We pulled the USGS quad map, and the one that's closest to this system, according to that map, is more than the required 50 feet. The gully that's between that intermittent stream and where the system is not located on the USGS quad map, so it's not counted by TCEQ. The system that is installed there now, which was put in under the licensing program, is working just exactly the way it should do. We took water samples from the effluent tank with the maintenance company and had them run through the lab. No fecal coliform were detected in the effluent and sprayed out. The question that now really arises is regarding the old existing system that was there before our department had dealings with it. Those old existing systems, they may be there for 10 years, they may be there for 50 years before we get involved on a piece of property. We have no record of that old existing system.
So because you don't have a record of it, does that imply perhaps a period of time before that was necessary, or it doesn't imply that they just didn't go through the process?
Either one is entirely possible. Because we have no records existing before we came to the property for this newer system, it could have been put there 10 years ago, it could have been put there 5 months before we got there. It wasn't, because from the other information Ms. Cameron gave us about the previous owner buying it from somebody else and what have you. So it's been there for some time. It is our interpretation of 285, which is the rules, Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 30, 285, that there are requirements as to how you abandon a septic tank or any kind of tank like that in place. There is not, however, a requirement that it be done. I have confirmed this with TCEQ, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, the people who wrote the rules.
So if you decide to abandon it, there's a specific way
Yes.
you have to go about doing it, but you can just not abandon it.
Right. Yes, we do not have the ability to go onto somebody's property and say, you must dig up your property, you must abandon this tank. Now, if the tank is exposed, it's like when they put in a new system, they knock a hole in the side of the old tank, so that's a different issue because now we have an open tank. But as long as it's still in the ground and covered, we have no right to force somebody to spend extra money to excavate and remove that tank. We suggest it to them because I do agree it's not a good thing to have something that could potentially collapse under your property at some time. But TCEQ has, when I discussed this with them, they said, no, we will not put a requirement like that in the rules because there's no way we can know if there are other tanks. If the tanks Ms. Camerdino has recently found are removed, there's nothing to say there's not another tank on the property. Sometimes houses have tanks on more than one stub out. They have a stub out going on either side. There'll be a tank on either side of the house. If somebody removes one tank, can it be certified that there's no other tank on the property? No, it cannot. Therefore, TCEQ said they will not put a rule in place that requires this. And that's our interpretation of 285. It's their interpretation of 285. 285 is the rule that applies to this. That's our position. As to the other issues regarding health issues and what have you, we're still more than happy to work with Ms. Cameron if we can get a medical diagnosis that we can work with.
But the problems that seem to be occurring there on the property are coming from the older tanks?
I don't believe so, because there was no evidence of where this tank was. Ms. Cameron did some good detective work, worked with the next-door neighbor who was there beforehand, and was able to show them, or from what I understand from Ms. Cameron, was able to tell them where to look for it. They've exposed the tanks. That's great. And I would still recommend that those tanks be removed. But I don't
Are you saying that it's the new tank that has probably got the methamphetamine drug?
No. The methamphetamine, the drug lab situation, we have absolutely no knowledge or dealings with that whatsoever. Yeah, and it's entirely possible, and Ms. Cameron has expressed a concern, and it is entirely possible that when drugs were being used or manufactured in this house, it could have gone into that old tank. That is a possibility.
Has it been tested, anything around there for methamphetamine?
As far as I know, no. The statement about the EPA having been there, when I first spoke with her and with her husband originally, and they mentioned the EPA, I was a bit surprised that the EPA would be dealing with an individual property site, and I said, I suspect that may be some misnomenclature, if you will. It's very common that people just refer to any environmental agency as the EPA, whether it's TCEQ, the local health department, or the actual EPA. I contacted Mr. West, the former property owner, and I said, I've been told that the EPA was on this property. His words were almost exactly those same words back. I couldn't remember what y'all's department name was, so I just called you the EPA. And as far as I've been able to ascertain, They said, I can't tell you they weren't there, but I've been unable to find anywhere that they were. As far as the clandestine drug lab, at first, we had no record of that, but I did some checking. The federal government does have a website for clandestine drug lab locations. At first, I looked at that. It was not on that property, or that property was not listed. However, I spent some time looking at it, and it turns out that the feds had misidentified the property. It was, this particular property was listed as being in Hearst. I have sent them an electronic communication notifying them that it is not in Hearst, it is in the city of Mansfield. But that's kind of a different issue. But like I said, we don't have any dealings with drug labs or drug lab cleanups. That's a federal issue. If they get to a site and they have evidence of sufficient contamination, there are protocols in place. If they didn't require it, the obvious implication is that it didn't meet their protocols requiring decontamination. But that, here again, that's not our bailiwick. Is
this unincorporated area?
It's in the city of Mansfield.
It's in the city of Mansfield?
Yes. And we do, through contract, we do the on-site wastewater work for the city of Mansfield. They used to do their own work many years ago, back before the state law got tougher about on-site wastewater, and it's entirely possible that's when this old system was put in, back before there was a statewide law requiring licensing of all systems that went in. So that's why I say that the old system could have been put in perfectly legally before the existing regulations were in place. That's just supposition, though. It could have been put in illegally, and we just never knew about it. I have no information about that old system.
And neither does the previous owner?
Mr. West, who was the owner of the property before the Camerdiner's, as far as I know from discussing it with him, no, he bought it as a distressed sale or what have you, or something along those lines of foreclosure or something like this. He bought it, went in, basically rehabbed the house, and turned it and sold it. And the question comes up, should he have done more or less? But that's a question that's outside my purview. I don't know.
So you're basically saying that there's really nothing that you could do, that there is no requirement for abandoning a septic tank.
For requiring the abandonment of the septic tank. There is a requirement for how you abandon it.
If you do.
Yes.
Okay.
There's not a requirement that you pull that old septic tank out of the ground.
Right. You can crush it in place. You can just pump out whatever's in it and cave it in and push dirt in on top of it. That's perfectly legal.
Okay. Any other questions of Mr. Jefferson at this time? Mr. Camerdiner, would you like to come forward and make any comments?
Stay close, yes.
Go ahead and they have your form. Go ahead and get list your name and your address, please.
Okay, Pamela Camerdiner. Would you like me to spell it for them?
I think
Okay,
they've got
thank you.
that. Go ahead.
Just to discuss further what Mr. Jefferson was addressing, when I first contacted his office, it was in regards to getting their new permit changed to our name, which is what's required by law, and asking their office to come out and check the system, and also questions about disposal of the old tank, because Henry West had informed us that there had been a meth lab and a failed septic that had been allowed to discharge raw sewage from the property onto the drainage ditch, and that EPA, now this is Mr. West's recanting of the story, EPA came out and spread lime on the creek, and there were no other problems. And so after having some concerns when I contacted Mr. Jefferson's office, he didn't know anything about the failed septic, and so we went from there, and that was really my primary concern. Any other issues about water testing was simply an effort to try to find out what was going on, because something was very clearly going on. So as time passed, I did a lot more research, did a lot of phone calls, and just recently located the old septic tank. My neighbor walked out, stood right where it was. We dug. She said it had always been visible, especially the cesspool from where the tank had been disconnected and allowed for the sewage to drain from under the pier and beam down through the creek. There was a puddle. She described how they had connected illegally, electricity and sparks were flying, all of that. And so she didn't have any difficulty at all determining where that had been, which happens to be right outside of my bedroom window. And so then I contacted Mr. Jefferson's office, since that an abandoned tank as of that nature is illegal, according to the TCEQ. And my thing is that the tank was illegally abandoned, and it was not even properly disposed. I mean, it wasn't properly disposed of. There's liquid sewage in that. And I sent you some pictures, which I think are pretty unusual, but what I did is, in reading about dye tests that you put in the tank, and you check your property to determine if there's a leak in your line, I put 2 dye tablets, 2 toilet tablets, out in the abandoned tanks. Had my husband drop one in each of the 2 tanks that are out there. 24 hours later, I'm looking around, and the pictures I have, that you have, I took with my camera, and they seem to indicate that that dye had, in fact, intruded into the home, which would explain a lot of my concerns about, high bacterial counts, various other concerns. And I just feel like the pictures pretty much speak to itself. And my feeling is that when I spoke to TCEQ also in Austin, and that their conclusion was that it's ultimately you guys' decision, but that by the fact that it is an abandoned tank, that part of the permitting is not A or B, but that it is a 2-prong regulation. Dispose of it properly, and then permit the new one, and that you're only allowed 1 septic system on a property that size. And so obviously if there had been another one that's not been properly disposed of, then that's in and of itself an issue. And there was never a question as to the location of the tank. It wasn't a tank that somebody had to go out and find, because at the time of the construction, my neighbors also informed me that they watched the installer dig, hit something, move over, and then install the new system, which is, to the best of my belief, is exactly why the new system is installed where it is, as opposed to the way it was originally drawn, is because they did in fact hit the old tank. And now whether that, that responsibility lies with the installer, but also with the county at that point. When I contacted 3 different septic companies, they were all very clear that I've got a real problem, and that I could be fined for this condition, and that that any time that you're disposing of an abandoned tank, that the receipt from the transporter showing that that waste has been transported is required to be attached to all documents that go to the county. Now, that's the impression that the septic people at these 3 companies, that's their belief. And so my contention is I do have a health hazard. I don't believe it's just impacting my property. There was, in fact, a meth lab there. The old system was in place when the meth lab was there, and when the raw sewage, and we're not talking about sewage that was treated, we're talking about totally without any treatment whatsoever, allowed to run into that drainage ditch. I showed you pictures of the water. It typically doesn't have water except for heavy periods of rain. My neighbor's lived there for 5 years. She tells me she's been flooded 3 times as a result of that drainage ditch, which, in my mind, even though my tanks, I don't know if the old tanks were flooded or not, it doesn't really matter, because what was allowed to drain into that ditch has since flooded her home on 3 different occasions, and I would think that that would constitute a public health hazard. And I certainly think it's constituting a health hazard for me in my home, and I just feel like the system shouldn't have been permitted without following through and making sure that the abandonment, because it's now put me in a position that's a great expense, presents a health hazard to me, and I still believe to the community. And that's my position.
And I guess, again, we permitted the other tank as to where it should have been placed.
The new system is the one with the permit, I guess.
And your contention is, well, we should have been there to see that they hit the old system when they were putting in the new one? Because as I understand, there's no legal requirement. I can understand what you're saying about 2 systems, but my guess is you're going to tell me it's 2 active systems.
Well, you can't actually have 10 systems on a piece of property. There is no law in Texas that allows you to regulate density of housing outside city limits. If the city of Mansfield put in something stricter, that would be possible. But state law and bill most definitely allow more than 1 system on a piece of property active.
Are there lateral lines installed here?
Are there lateral lines installed? There were probably lateral lines installed on that old original system. The new system is an aerobic one, does not have lateral lines.
Now, I guess one of the things I'm having, it would seem to me like your action really is toward whoever you bought the property from.
I do believe I have some action there, quite frankly. Part of my concern is that legally, it appears that he's acted within the limits of the law because he has a permit for the new septic, which on the surface would look like that there's not a concern, but there is a concern, and the concern is the new septic's not the concern, the old septic is the concern. That's the one that poses the environmental risk as a result of the meth lab and the raw sewage dump. And, I mean, and Mr. Jefferson's understanding as to what the law requires and from what the three companies I spoke to, as well as the TCEQ person, indicated that that is a two-prong requirement that you, and I mean, it addresses it down here under regulations, that the old one shall be abandoned. It doesn't say it's optional or if you would like to, and that since the abandoned tank's location was known, it's just a matter of saying, where's the transport? At least the transport, if you don't want to have it withdrawn, empty it, I mean, and then fill it with dirt, and that was not even done. There's no mention on the permit that there's anything amiss, so that when you're a home buyer and you see this permit, it looks as though it's totally legal, and that they talk about the limited warranty of habilitative, being able to live there. And so with that, the implied warranty is that all federal guidelines and all environmental rules have been complied with. But in essence, so what I'm saying is that permit then meets the building code's permits for it being posing an environmental risk, when in actuality that's not the case. It does pose an environmental risk. And that one step, by permitting that one without properly disposing of the other one, set in chain a whole lot of other steps that are very costly.
That have led to the inhabilitative.
Yeah, exactly. Habilitative, or however the word is, yes.
Habitable.
That's it.
No, I did not. And quite frankly, if I ever purchase another house with a septic system, I certainly would. I simply looked at the permit. The gentleman that sold us the house had that ready. You know, and you look at that, and now what I know is that's not enough. Obviously, that's not enough. Whether this is an exception or the rule, it doesn't matter. In that I do have some issues with him about violation of real estate laws, but he was only able to sell that house with a permit for that septic. Okay? I mean, that's the only way you can put that house on the market. And without that permit, if he had been required to comply with the law, then I would not have been in a position.
And your argument is that complying with the law meant those other tanks had to be pulled.
Abandoned, pulled. My preference would be pulled at this point because I'm so.
But Mr. Jefferson's interpretation is that there is no requirement to abandon those deals.
Well, my understanding was that there is a requirement to abandon them, but there's not a requirement to make sure that that's complied with, which obviously makes no sense to me at all.
Unfortunately, conflicting laws and notification of events sometimes don't make good sense.
Right.
And frequently, we see situations every year through the legislature that maybe one word is left out of a piece of legislation that goes through and has ramifications years later. And we dealt with that since I've been on the court with some colonials that were built because one word was left out of the legislation it passed. By not having stipulations that specifically say how it will be addressed before another permit is given, I think has created a great deal of gray area for you to have to slog your way through. And unfortunately, I don't see that there is a direct remedy. I see what makes sense and what's logical, and I understand the total frustration. I'm frustrated just listening to it.
It's very frustrating. Well, I guess my interpretation of what I've been told by TCEQ and what I believe that the law said was different from Mr. Jefferson's. Now, who's right? I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to deal with that other than when you read the requirements for a permit before permitting authorities issue, and it lists this variety, and one of them is the unauthorized systems, the disposal of the unauthorized system. That's listed as part of the permit.
Unauthorized?
Unauthorized system being an abandoned system, or one that's no longer used for a septic, it's no longer used. That's item I of the same, regulation here. It says, before permitting authorities issue an authorization to construct, and it goes down, and when you get to I, that is letter I, about the unauthorized system. And had there even just been a note on the permit that says there's an abandoned tank, there's an abandoned tank on the property, check it out, it's been properly disposed of, it's not been, we can't locate it. Any identifying information that would make a homeowner at least aware that there was some legal issues, environmental issues. But, that's my interpretation, and the gentlemen that work at that own the septic companies, theirs was that the belief that you are required to abandon it properly before permitting the new one. Now, that's just the information I have, and so I really would like to ask, is that...
Jefferson?
Your Honor, let me first say before David becomes involved in this, and we have vetted this with the District Attorney's Office, and it's not just simply an interpretation of Public Health Department of the rules. Mr. Ponder with the DA's office has been working with us on this, and he confirms our belief on what we're legally obligated to and what we have the right to do. And so it's not a matter of just a different interpretation of the rules. Our DA's office has been involved with this to quite an extent.
And so your, Mr. Ponder, your belief is that we did not have the right to put something. You need to come up to one of the microphones.
Chris.
There's still some additional research that needs to be done. Mr. Jefferson and I have visited about this issue, and it's been my anticipation to see what Ms. Kammerdiener provided today to the court and what her. I hadn't seen any correspondence from her. It all had been through discussions with Mr. Jefferson, and I had anticipated on looking into it further following today's presentation. But as my opinion was consistent with what Mr. Jefferson represented to the court. It's so far what I've looked at.
Well, okay, I just a simple question. Her reference to item I.
Yeah, item I is you have to look at the way the regulation is written. You have section A, section B. The requirements are under H, 1, 2, 3, 4, like this. I is the next item. It is not a requirement under that section. It is the next section. It says unauthorized systems, boreholes, cesspools, and seepage pits are prohibited for installation and use. That is a separate paragraph. It is not a subsection of the requirements for a submittal. It is a separate statement unto itself. So, H is what we're looking at, H1, H2, H3.
And then
those are our requirements. I is the next subsection or subparagraph.
And I guess the only thing that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
But I doesn't count?
Yeah, it just says boreholes, cesspools, and these things are illegal. We're not talking about boreholes and cesspools. We're talking about a previous septic system and tanks that were in the ground, probably, or possibly at least, perfectly legally. That's the whole thing. When you read the regulations, you have to read this section and what it says. Stop. New idea. Boreholes and cesspools are illegal. They are unauthorized systems. That is not.
And I guess what you're wishing that we had done, or are you looking for us to do something now? Was, you feel like that there should have been something on a plat or on something that said there's an existing place underneath.
Absolutely. I think that the building codes require that. I think that all real estate laws require that.
But you do realize that we
I understand that. And I understand what Mr. Jefferson is saying, but when you look at the law, it says general application requirements, and it lists down, and I falls under the subtitle of general application requirements. I understand what he's saying, but that is the only subtitle, and then all the other items are listed under that. So that's my contention, is that there should have been, the tank was there, they hit the tank, it was a failed system prior to the new one. It wasn't just an old tank, it was a failed system disposing raw sewage off of my property onto other property and presenting a health hazard, in addition to the meth lab, which is another environmental issue. And I do think that it should have been required, since that is listed as one of the requirements, and just as what the septic companies told me is that you just attach a receipt from the transporter showing when and where it was transported, and then the filling in part, if it hadn't been filled in, I might could say, okay, well, I can understand the county wouldn't know that. But there was not even a record that it was ever emptied. And so it is not empty, and it is vented up under my pier and beam house, and I think that accounts for a lot of issues. I mean, aside from being costly, it's risky. That's my contention. That's my belief.
Well, what we will, I think, do at this point in time is let Mr. Ponder review what other information you've given, and then listen to the recommendations of the district attorney's office at that point in time.
Okay.
And kind of go from there.
I appreciate it, and
All right.
thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Your Honor, members of the court, we go to item 2. This is a briefing concerning the mineral accounts underneath Tarrant County. Ms. Price.
Good morning, Commissioners, Judge. First, we want to start off with just a little bit of information.
Hold it. We're going to have
a short break.
Short break. We can do that.
Anytime one of them leaves here, we're today.
more. Sorry.
Well, I just get everybody's attention.
That's good. Okay. Okay, thank you. We're going to talk just a real brief second about the overall collections. I know some of the e-government stuff you have seen, but of course collections relate as well to everything, but especially to the minerals, because John Marshall, who's the chief appraiser's standing joke is that the way leases are going everywhere, and some of you have already leased your property too, we may very well have one mineral account for every homeowner that we have, and we have close to 500,000 homeowner properties. So you can imagine how many more mineral accounts we're going to have to add. So I thought we'd just talk a little bit about success with that, because e-government is imperative. If we increase our role that much, we have to be able to handle it. It was an outstanding year for us. We collected 81.5% versus 74% in most years. That's most of the money came in and was processed the same day. We collect $3 billion for all of our entities combined, and that translated to an additional $150,000 earned in the month of January in interest, getting that money in the bank. Our collected funds were at $37 million a day, and that's a lot of money. The float was reduced, and that in turn amounts to a huge bank savings for us. Let's see if I'm going the right way.
Can I divert you for one moment?
Yes, sir.
We had and I think GK has talked with you a little bit about this individual who deposited or said they put their tax payment in a mailbox in Bedford, and that they bundled everything up and took it to the downtown, and it didn't get postmarked till the next day.
Yes.
How difficult would it be to determine whether or not that check actually arrived the next day?
We have an image of the check and an image of the envelope also showing what day they came in, and it'll show
So if it were to come in, if it were postmarked the 1st and showed up on the 1st,
we would know it was probably mailed the day before, because you can't get it postmarked and received the same day.
yeah, what we found, Court members, that some of the folks indicate that, and I think some of the post offices, instead of actually, it says last pickup 2 o'clock on the post box, and so you drop your thing in there. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that that post office binds it up, takes it inside, and postmarks it. They may not they may bind it up, take it to Fort Worth, and Fort Worth may not postmark it till the next day. So
that's a growing concern, because the laws. Go ahead.
Because of our political things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that's one thing that we're told, but maybe Joe Citizen doesn't have a clue.
Well, and I think this particular individual called in because he had done that and had received a penalty as a result of it being postmarked the February the 1st versus the 31st. And so I just wondered, when you said one day or the first day, if there was any way we could go back and
It's first day received for us. Okay. The law actually says must be postmarked January 31st or prior to that, not February 1st, because you have from the date of receipt in October till January to pay. That is your grace period. So the law is very strict.
So if we were to determine from those receipts you received on the 1st that there were envelopes that were postmarked the 1st, do we have the ability to go back and defray those penalties? Because if you got 2 envelopes, you received both the payments the same day of February the 1st. Mm-hmm. One of them is postmarked February the 1st. One of them is postmarked January the 31st. This one, even though you received the payment exactly the same day, this one's going to get a penalty and this one's not.
That's correct, but we wouldn't get it on February 1st with a February 1st postmark. It'd be February 2nd before we got them. Postmark's always a day after delivery, ahead of delivery.
Okay.
And if there's a question, we tell citizens to get us a letter from the postmaster indicating that the mail was not picked up and was not postmarked timely. And in that case, on a February 1st, we would probably waive it if the postmaster will take culpability for failure to postmark.
So
and we do that fairly often.
In that situation, perhaps go to, how do you do that though, since you can't communicate directly with anybody anymore? You have a central number somewhere.
The post office, we call the post office in January and say, we are like the IRS. This is a critical deadline for us. We want we want you to understand that we need all mail picked up as much as possible. And they're very good about working with us. We call the Jack Watson Central Station. And then we recommend that citizens call the postmaster or go to the station where they deposited the mail. that's responsible for that pickup. And usually the postmaster at the individual stations will work with them on it. We do, 100 or 200 a year who have a February 1st postmark. Unfortunately, the law didn't say, well, it might be January 31st or it might be February 1st. In this case, it's cut and dry, and we've been to court over it and actually won 2 court cases on postmarks.
Okay.
Okay. The e-government, it was a real winner. We sent 1 million checks to the bank this year electronically. When we started this program this year that you helped us fund, FedEx was the only other project, only other office in the nation who was doing this hybrid program that we use. So they had great success with it, and we do too. It's become quite the thing now, and everybody is touring. In fact, we laughed and said we're going to ask for a tour guide in our budget because City of Fort Worth has been here, City of Arlington have been here. We've had a visitor from South Carolina, all looking at how we do it. It gives us better control over return items, and that's always a good thing when you can cut your NSF down. Transactions post and in that line also, talking about all the increasing minerals, we had 35,000 payments made online last year from October to January. That's huge. It's up 30%, and that will allow us to serve all these growing mineral accounts a lot more also. There were the online piece, because people can pay online with an e-check for no fee. We wanted to just thank everybody that was involved in that. Thank you guys for giving us the funding and the vision to help us make that happen. And then obviously Chase and Spindle, the county IT was huge help to us, and especially the auditors who helped us determine the risk in that e-government and the collection piece on that. You can see there's our average collection, how much that shot up. The dark column is the prior year, and the darker column is the current year, the light column is the prior year. We were way up on that. That's always a good thing to get your money in the bank faster. That's a total levy collected from prior years, 04 to 08 for January. 06 was a little bit of an anomaly. We had a little bit of a systems meltdown the tail end of January, which is part of what drove us to push this new system through, so you can see how far we dropped off. If you have a system that's not real stable, you can lose a lot of money going to the bank. That was why it was critical to get all this money in the bank.
So by doing that, that's $150,000?
Yes, yes. And that's just the number of online e-government transactions. It amounted to about 100 million, is that what that says? I believe, and it's broken up by credit card and e-checks. And as you can see, e-checks are growing substantially. There's no fee for e-checks, and people really like that. And there is a fee for credit cards. Whoops, going the wrong way here. Well, let's talk a little bit about the gas drilling. Just a few brief facts. Everybody hears about the Barnett Shale, and I don't know how much people really know about the little bit of history on it. And I worked on a presentation for a couple of groups on Barnett Shale and their history. I thought I might give you just a brief overview of it, and then we'll talk about the tax impact on it. My title was Got Gas, Tarrant County Does, kind of like Got Milk. You often hear people say this is going to be the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that's going to save us all from our taxes. So I thought that was a pretty apropos picture with the rainbow in it. I've heard people say if you talk about Barnett Shale and you whisper it, everybody gathers around and wants to hear about it. It's like giving the Sermon on the Mount. The Chamber of Commerce has done repeated seminars on it. It's the best attended seminar the last 2 years that they've had. It is probably the most frequent asked question that we're seeing in the tax area. What about this gas? How will that impact my tax bill? Are they going to lower my bill? Is my bill going down substantially? Where is it going? And so I thought we'd deal a little bit with it. It was discovered, it was named for John Barnett, who lives in Sinsaba in 1870. It was originally called Lower Bend Shale, and it was renamed Barnett because it was first discovered by the geologists as in an exposed outcropping by the Barnett's home place, as my father always said, their homestead. And it bubbled out through the shale, through the rock formation, into a sulfuric gas, and they could see it then, but they couldn't mine it that far back.
Did he find this when he was hunting?
Found it when he was hunting, I'm sure. They originally found it in the 1950s at what they call the Lower Bend on the Colorado River, but they couldn't produce it. And shale is obviously quartz and sand that's under large pressure. It's a Mississippian-age shale. In this area, it's 6,500 to 8,900 feet deep, primarily in Tarrant County. It's the largest gas field in Texas and one of the most important in the U.S. to date. Presently, it spreads across 15 to 18 counties. I saw an estimate yesterday, though, that said there are 3 more counties that they have now discovered the shale is probably deep enough to access for drilling, so it'll be in about 18 counties. At its thickest, it's about 1,000 feet. The shale is about 1,000 feet thick, and at its thinnest, it's about 30 feet deep. We own a place that's been in my family 100 years in Mills County, and it's 30.1 inches deep in Mills County, not thick enough for drilling, unfortunately. Why is it a big wonder now? Obviously, you know, Mitchell Energy, which is now Devon, one of our largest taxpayers, can horizontal drill. They came up with a procedure to drill it. They came up with better discovery techniques to make it easier to find. And they also discovered that the sweet spots, the spots that are easy to get to, are wide within these urban counties. The formations were vertical. Shale was too tight for vertical drilling. And then they came up with the fracture process. Mitchell Energy used a gel mixture in the 80s and perfected it in the late 1998. With the water and the gel, they were able to fracture the rock and take that out. And drilling exploded with over 4,800 wells in place today in the Barnett Shale, and about 1,000 of those wells are located in Tarrant County and growing monthly. Barnett Shale, those are the counties that have the heaviest participation. As you can see, we are smack dab in the middle of that. Jack County is expanding, as well as some of the expansion into Ellis. Palo Pinto is also expanding in with that. The major players in this area, there are about 100 companies active in the shale. XTO is the largest, and in 2006 they paid us better than $9 million on their accounts related to their Barnett Shale. Devon paid on 450 accounts to the tune of $10 million. Chesapeake has grown. This is last year's figure. They were at about 11, and they're more than double that now. And 4.7 is the relatively newcomer on the block. TCU, they're drilling at TCU and Colonial Parkway. In fact, I heard yesterday that they were selling out to one of the other players.
Ms. Price, when you talk about those numbers, that's to all
That's to all taxing entities. I have the ones just for Tarrant County a little further back, but that is to all taxing entities that we collect for. That's the number of mineral accounts. You can see where the growth has occurred. That shows about 13,000. We have added roughly 3,000 new ones in the last month or so that are late Barnett Shale adds. Pritchard and Abbott does the appraising on these, and it takes months sometimes to get the division orders figured out, who's got the well, who's leased whose, and who it belongs to. So they will add these accounts all year long. That we are estimated to be as high as 26,000 accounts next year and possibly 100,000 the following year on those total accounts. But it's just growing. The other big plus on Barnett Shale is the related personal property. Everything to do with these increases your tax base. If you're bringing in any drilling activities, any supplies to go with those, the rigs, although, you know, last year's legislature passed a law determining if the rigs could be taxed at their home base, but there are still rigs that are here that are taxable.
Do they have to at least leave the county in order to be taxed at their home base?
They can be in the county, I believe it's a year, I can't remember exactly the dates, and still be taxed at their home base. There's been a big dispute over that. Do you remember, Tom, if that's a year? It's the majority of the time, yeah.
So what if they end up spending a year and a day here? Does that mean we
They
get
can be taxed, yes. And some of them are here that long. The leasehold equipment, all the tubing, all the wellheads, the compressors, the heat treaters, any vessels they transport with, those all become taxable here. They are not subject to the same determination as the drilling rigs on the owners. The service companies, their pipe yards, many of you have seen these large pipe yards growing. Those are all taxed, and the appraisal district is scurrying to catch up with where they are located and how much inventory they have, as well as all the trucking companies. All the gathering lines, remember that we tax power lines, we also tax the gathering lines, the transmission lines, and any compression stations that relate to these, as well as a gas processing plant. And there are new gas processing plants being built in Tarrant County that will go on our roll.
Are there any up and operating at this time?
I believe there's one or two gas processing that are. There are some in our outlying counties that do the processing, but I believe there's one online already. And remember, these wells, the gas, if they drill your gas, you will not get a tax bill on it until the gas starts flowing. If they lease your property and they drill it in the, say, 3-year term or 5-year term, whatever your lease is, even if they drill it and then cap it, if they don't have the gathering lines to transmit it, we're not going to tax you. It becomes taxable on January 1st of the year that the gas starts flowing.
To the, not the property owner, but the mineral rights owner.
To the mineral rights owner, that's correct. And in many cases, that's split.
Is there no way to tax the well instead of having to go out and tax what could be 1,000 mineral owners for one well?
According to the research that the appraisal district has done and the little that I've done, Texas has taxed the mineral holders themselves because it is your property tax right. It's not the driller's right. It's your right since the 1920s. That's the way it's been set up with oil and gas both. It has to do with the determination of whose right it is and who it belongs to.
So if you have a company that has, the property owner has 25% mineral rights and the company has the 75%, the company pays taxes on that.
That's correct. They will pay taxes on their portion of the working royalties, and the mineral owner pays their piece of the royalties also. Taxes, the mineral counts are growing. In 2003, we had 2,000 accounts for a total levy. This is county-wide figures. This is for all of my entities, for about 3,000. In 2006, we had nearly 10,000 for an $18 million levy, as well as the industry. The industry that supports this also is adding not just to the property tax, but to sales tax and hotels tax. You probably saw the business press talked about the spinoff effect this time and how many small restaurants had sprung up around all these and the jobs they were adding. That's the taxable values of minerals, and that is the levy. That's not the levy, that's the appraised value. $1.8 billion is the appraised value on the minerals for 2007. While that sounds like a lot, you'll look, this next slide will show you, it really is not the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for taxes, because the second column in from the right shows mineral lease properties. It will amount for Tarrant County, not for all of my entities, but for Tarrant County, to about 1% of your collected tax revenue will be mineral leases. And growing a little bit, but it will never be as high as real estate residential or real estate commercial. The backbone of property is always going to be real property. And while mineral accounts are a part of your real property, they're just not as significant.
So the dollar amount that we're talking about is?
I believe the dollar's on the next slide. There's your levy for 2007 is right at $5 million, and that's county only for it. And you can see how it's grown. It was very flat in 2000, and it's begun to move up. The long-term benefits, the gas fields tend to have an average play of about 20 years, sometimes as much as 30. That isn't to say that that's taxable play we're talking about for production. It isn't to say that they won't come up with another way to refrac them or make them reproduce. We don't know that. But the spike up is on about 3 years. When the well first goes into production, and your minerals are being taxed, the first 3 years you'll probably see a spike, and then it begins to fall. It'll level out a little bit, and then it gradually declines. And all of those factors on past fields are taken into account when the value is set for these minerals. Denton County was working Barnett Shale several years before Tarrant County was. That last year, they saw a significant fall in their taxable value on their minerals because it's considered a mature field at that point. But it's estimated that Barnett Shale will bring in 100,000 new jobs and $10.4 billion in revenue by 2015. That is just a little chart that the City of Fort Worth gave us that they estimated based on some homeowners. If you're looking at your own home, you're never going to get rich on it. The average homeowner's monthly royalty on an average lot is about $140, falling over the course of 20 years to a little under $20 a month. That's monthly revenue. And they generally start their tax bills on average are a little less than $100, and they can fall to just $1 or $2 towards the end. As your income falls, the taxes fall correspondingly. That'll be a challenge for us, as it has been in some of the West Texas County managing the oil wells. What do we do with all these little bitty mineral accounts that no one wants to pay? Most of the time in West Texas, they bundle them up. When they reach $5 or $10, then they send them. But you always, at any given time, have very small amounts due on these mineral accounts.
Which again would make a point to do it by well as opposed to doing it by
Absolutely. But that's not the way they're going to do it right now. And that is the Giddings oil field, gas field, was first produced in the 60s, long before we fracked it with the gel mixture that Devon did. But that will give you some idea of how gas is going. This actual Giddings field is still in play and in its third revision. But that shows you the course from 93 to 2007, how it rose, fell, then it leveled a little, and then it began to gradually taper off. That's the production in the gas field itself, and that is what Pritchard and Abbott and Tarrant Appraisal District are expecting, and all the experts that we've talked to for the Barnett Shale to exhibit a decline like that also. And thank you for listening on a long day, and we hope you have an energizing day.
Thanks.
You bet.
Appreciate it.
Your Honor, that's all we have this morning.
At this time, the Commissioners Court will now recess the open session and proceed to closed session to discuss items exempted under Sections 551.071, 072, 074, 076, and 087 of the Texas Government. Move approval. Item number one, $190 payable to DRS of Tarrant County with the amount to come from self-insurance fund requesting auditor pay the amount immediately without necessity for.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion second. Please vote. Passes unanimously. Item number three is Catherine Williams, Mrs. Pancho, Mexican Buffet. We're requesting authorization from the county judge to sign the settlement agreement and receive full satisfaction of our claim.
Move approval.
Second.
Please vote.
I had a cookie.
Motion passes unanimously. Item number three, we're requesting authorization from the county judge to sign a settlement and release agreement and receive a check in the amount of $51,250. Move approval.
Second.
Vote. Motion passes unanimously. Adjourned.